They say that a picture paints 1,000 words. That is why, even though there are many written accounts of the Japanese occupation that can be read from history books, these drawings continue to speak to us through its visceral depictions of the horrors of war, years after their publication. In 1946, just a year after the end of the Japanese occupation, Singaporean artist Liu Kang and his friend Zheng actually published a collection of 3 volumes, English volumes, which depicted the atrocities of the Japanese occupation in 36 charcoal drawings. In the same year, they also released a Chinese edition, and this one contained 24 of the drawings from the first and second English volumes. Mr. Huang, you are 92 this year, and I know you were just 15 years old when the Japanese army invaded Singapore. When you looked through these books, were there any drawings that reflected your experiences then?
Many of them did, actually. They are all a collection of very insightful depictions of the atrocities and the cruelties that we experienced during the occupation.
These cartoons were actually illustrated by Liu Kang, and his friend wrote the commentaries, and he was also in charge of the overall production of the books. So these sketches were actually depicted based on their personal experiences and also the stories which they heard from their friends and families. Mr. Huang, this picture here, does it resonate with you?
This is very true. One day, my father was sitting at the front porch, and a Japanese officer passed in front of our house. He did not stand up to bow. The Japanese officer came back, turned around, stood next to him, asked him to stand up, and gave him 4 or 5 slaps on the face.
Mr. Huang, I understand you were also involved in a death march?
Oh yes, I did. But this one, for example, I did not go through this personal experience of having to dig my own grave. What happened was, we were assembled one afternoon at the military camp in Serangoon, the old Simon Road School, and we were put in 4 batches. The first 3 batches, they had to march down Tampines Road, Changi Road, up to Bedok, and many of them did not return home at all. Now, when we started the death march, my family and I, it was about 4:30 or 5:30, but by the time we reached Changi, it was pitch black. So the Japanese officer told us, go home, go back to the camp tomorrow morning at noon and report again. But none of us went.
Like you said, these illustrations that were captured by Liu Kang really depicted the various experiences that people had to go through during that time. Chop suey is actually a mixed Chinese dish with many ingredients, and the authors actually chose the title chop suey to actually reflect the various experiences that they wanted to capture in these books so that people could read, and it serves as a visual record of what had happened to Singapore during those times. I actually have a copy of the Japanese edition here. This was through the efforts of Professor Michiko Nakahara from Waseda University. She was actually traveling in the Netherlands, and she was walking into an antiquarian bookstore, and she came across to a copy of an original chop suey, and she felt that it was very important that this book should be read by a wider audience, actually the Japanese audience. So she approached Mr. Liu Kang, and she actually asked him if she could republish the images and then to also translate the text into Japanese. So this was released in 1990. In closing, Mr. Huang, could you share with us some of your personal thoughts about the significance of these books to you as a war survivor, and also to younger generations, generations like myself who have not lived through these dark times?
To me, personally, painful though in feeling and memory, when we flip through the pages, the book serves a good purpose. It is telling us, it is educating us, it is warning us that these should not be repeated. But unfortunately, man never learns. Man has been fighting each other for decades, from time immemorial. So even today, despite the peace we seem to have, this world is still a very troubled world. It is teaching us and telling us something about what happened. And the message is, please make sure that we do not repeat it.